It is the time now. Lots to come on the subject of Matthew Perry. And yeah, keep your suggestions coming of the best TV sitcom character of all time. It all began with a conversation about Chandler Bing, who may very well be the best TV sitcom character ever. But your suggestions otherwise, please. 81333 is the text number. Start your message with the first word Kent. You can email. It's adam.dowling@bbc.co.uk. So, I want to know this morning whether you feel well supported in your workplace. Some of us, of course, require certain adjustments, and one charity is calling on the government to strengthen the Equality Act to deal with discrimination against people with disabilities in the workplace. Epilepsy Action wants companies fined 5% of their global turnover if they're found to have discriminated against someone with a disability, and that, of course, includes epilepsy. Let's bring on, first of all, Rebecca Smith, Deputy CEO of Epilepsy Action. And Rebecca, I know you've conducted your own research among people that have epilepsy. What have you found out?
Yeah, morning. Some really sad and disappointing results, really, when you think where we are with the Equality Act and discrimination. It was an anonymous survey for employers, so it was 500 employers responded, and 42% of them admitted that they would purposely sort of not give someone a job who had epilepsy. Wow. Because they thought it would be challenging for them to deal with in the workplace.
That's pretty shocking thought, that, isn't it? And that may seem quite an alien concept to a lot of people, that we're still living in a world where that could happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And, there's so many reasons for that. I think there's a lot of stigma around epilepsy and around, other disabilities. But also, there's a lot of ignorance. I mean, 14% thought that they could reject someone from a role purely because they say that they've got epilepsy. And that's absolutely wrong. That is discrimination, because with a few reasonable adjustments, most people can do the jobs that they need to.
We of course, we have an Equality Act. There's something enshrined in law that's meant to prevent discrimination against people in the workplace and elsewhere, of course. Are employers falling short when it comes to that, then?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, certainly this survey seems to demonstrate that. And when you look at the kind of impact of things like employment tribunals, the amount of fines that are being given out, sort of averaging like £13,000 over 21-22, it's just not enough, clearly, to make people sit up and think, what do I really need to do in order to be a positive workplace for people?
And I guess it's an attitudes thing, isn't it? For a lot of employers, attitudes quite simply need to change, and people are perhaps ignorant. They may not realise necessarily that they're acting in a way that is discriminatory. How on earth do we go about tackling something like that?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of really simple things that employers can do. There's training's the most obvious one. There's training in a whole range of disabilities. There's schemes like the Disability Confidence Scheme to make sure that you know about the sort of things that you need to consider. And then for people who need sort of additional adjustments that might cost the employer money, the government run a scheme called Access to Work, which supports them with those adjustments. So it's not as if there's nothing out there that can really help with this. And all employers need to do is have that knowledge and that training, and that'll, make them understand that this is not a complex situation.
One of the things that stood out for me in this research was that nearly half of employees wouldn't report bullying or discrimination because they feared some sort of, reprisal, something would happen to them. That's another really difficult thing to try to tackle, isn't it? And to help people and to get it so that that's no longer a fear people have.
Yes, and you can see why, can't you, when you're seeing the results from employers? People are too scared to speak out. And that actually perpetuates the stigma and the ignorance about the condition, because people are afraid. They're afraid if they say something about the way they're being treated, that they'll lose their job. And we all need to earn money. So it really is, one of those situations where if the employers do more, employees will speak out more, and people can work together in order to solve this problem.
And I know there'll be some employers listening to the show this morning, and I know in your particular case, you're looking at the issue of epilepsy and how employers deal with that. What's your message to them if they have members of their team who have epilepsy about what they can do differently, perhaps?
Yeah, well, the first thing is come to our website, epilepsy.org.uk, and we've got all sorts of information there about training. We've got a fact sheet for employers that sort of backs up what we found in this survey. So, there's lots that they can do that's really simple, really positive, and isn't going to cost them a lot of money.
Rebecca, thank you. That's Rebecca Smith, there, Deputy CEO of
you.
Epilepsy Action. I want to bring on Sam now. Sam is from Sevenoaks, and he's experienced discrimination in the workplace because of his epilepsy. So Sam is exactly the kind of person that we're talking about this morning. Sam, good morning. Welcome to the show.
Good morning. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
First of all, tell us a bit about your epilepsy diagnosis, because it sort of came about after you had a seizure in the workplace, right?
Yeah, I was 19 years old. I worked for a major supermarket, and I worked as a baker. At 19 years old, after about 3 years of starting to work there, I just out of nowhere had a tonic-clonic seizure at work. I was taken away at King's College in London to have a full diagnosis. I had to take 3 weeks out while they got the medication sorted, and I returned, and I did receive, at first, some of the colleagues were quite understandable, but it was mainly management.
Right.
For the past 3 years, I've been out of work because after 16 years, as I said, the epilepsy started to get uncontrolled. When I had even with some seizures, or the last seizure I had there, I collapsed at work. I used to work in the bakery, and I came to with a group of management team laughing at me.
Wow.
Again, they were, as the CEO said, there's nothing. When I asked them what they wanted, if they knew what to do, and they didn't. There were some of them trying to take pictures of me while having a seizure, like selfie. When I asked them what they wanted, if they knew what to do, and they didn't. There were some of them trying to take pictures of me while having a seizure, like selfies.
Unbelievable. Wow.
Yeah. And when normally after I have a bad seizure, it takes at least about 5 days to regain sort of full health and sort of been able to move. And normally, out of all the ones that I had, I was faced with disciplinary for taking time out of work. During one of these disciplinaries, a member of the management team I've worked here for longer than you, and I've never taken a day off sick.
Wow.
And I felt quite upset, and I felt as though I had to apologise for what I have and taking time out.
So many questions I want to ask you, Sam. I want to start with one that perhaps many people might be asking. Help us to understand what happens when you're going through one of these seizures. You talked about some of the appalling behaviour that you spotted your colleagues doing. What should they do? What's the best thing that they could do in that situation?
Well, the best thing they could, there isn't anything you can do really in a tonic-clonic seizure while someone's having, when one is having one, but it's just to keep their head safe. Because that's the main thing, and never ever put anything in their mouth.
Yeah.
It is mainly make sure they're in a safe position and their head is always safe, right, and never put anything in their mouth.
And it must be really tough for you. You've gone through these sort of situations where things haven't gone as they should have done. That must make you then really nervous about it happening again at work. You must be thinking the whole time, oh, please don't happen while I'm in the workplace, because, this is going to happen, or this is going to happen, or so-and-so is going to do this.
Yes, I sometimes get what you call warning signs where you would hear either music or voices. It's very random things, and if I ever was to, or if ever I did, I would try find a quiet and safe spot. I would just take off like my jumper, and I'll just sort of lay down, and then I would probably get about 40 seconds to react and get somewhere safe. And then I would start sort of shaking. My head would turn to the right, and then I would lose consciousness.
Right.
Normally, again, as well, actually, one thing I will add is if a seizure lasts longer than 5 minutes, they need to call 999 immediately or emergency services. Again, because sometimes if I'm on my own and I come round, I don't know how long the seizure's been, but normally 9 times out of 10, I would bite my tongue and there would be blood everywhere. And
Right.
again, once from management, appalling comments would come out. Again, taking the mickey because I wouldn't be able to talk properly when I come round. And again, very, very bad. Well, again, appalling messages or just things that the management would say.
And obviously, we don't know where it was that you worked, and I don't want to know for obvious reasons. But without being too sort of specific, what do you think needs to happen now in workplaces anywhere in Kent or elsewhere to stop that kind of thing happening, to change people's attitudes? What needs to happen?
Well, I mean, for people under management, they should be told by the head of the management immediately. First aid, definitely. They should be trained because out of all the first aiders I knew, they didn't know what to do.
Right.
So really, it's just mainly if obviously management should be disciplined for it, because it's a workplace. As CEO said, that we're here to earn money. We're not here to be discriminated against. It is. It's just literally the first aid. Any comments made, I mean, there are some decent people out there, and they should maybe go forward to either the head of the store or wherever you work and sort of comment on this, and they should be disciplined for it. Instead of taking the mickey and getting their phones out and taking selfies of someone while on the floor with biting their tongue with blood pouring out of their mouth and just shaking. And they can't really sort of talk until at least 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or even later. So they can't communicate properly, or straight away. And also straight away, if they're unsure, just call the emergency services.
Sam, first of all, I'm really sorry to hear some of the stuff that you've gone through in the workplace, and I can only hope that what you and the charity here are calling for does make a difference and does happen, and that attitudes perhaps do change. I wonder what you make, though, specifically of what Epilepsy Action is calling for. They want the government to strengthen the Equality Act. So in other words, to fine companies a pretty large amount, 5% of their overall global turnover, if they're found to have discriminated against someone who's got a disability, and that includes obviously epilepsy. Do you back that?
Oh God, yeah. I mean, it's also raising awareness of them, because I don't think if you were to ask the majority of people, they would know what epilepsy is. I mean, to be honest, until I was diagnosed when I was 19, I mean, I'm 35 now, but if you'd have asked me, I wouldn't know what it was, and if, like, while working, what I could do to help or to keep them safe.
And Sam, I'll ask you the same question that I asked Rebecca at the end there. If there's an employer listening to us right now who's got a member of their team or members who have epilepsy, how should they be dealing with people? And what's your message to those who perhaps aren't dealing with people in the correct way?
Well, then the moment they hear of a colleague or management just comment or make funny gestures at someone, then they need to be disciplined immediately. And then, not so much taught a lesson, but just to be told to keep, everyone is equal and you should be treated equally. No matter what you are, any disability, you need to be treated equally.
Sam, I think it's really brave of you to have shared your story, and I appreciate you doing so. So thank you for joining us this morning.
No problem. Thank you very much for having me.
Sam there from Sevenoaks, who's experienced discrimination in the workplace because of his epilepsy. And before that, you heard Rebecca Smith, Deputy CEO of Epilepsy Action. An intriguing one. If you've got an experience of that yourself, I would love to hear from you this morning. And I'd especially love to hear from you, actually, if you're an employer and you've done something in your workplace to call out that sort of behaviour and to make things easier for people suffering with any disability, dealing with any issue in their life that might affect how they act in the workplace. I'd love to know what you've done that's maybe helped things. Call it advice. You can tweet us at BBC Radio Kent. You can email adam.dowling@bbc.co.uk. If you want to get in touch on the phone, it's 0800